Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903.
As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and if you've been paying attention to the news, you have seen that Nancy Pelosi actually decided to go to Taiwan and has a lot of people nervous about this. Is this a good move? What will China's reaction be? Is this just setting up a situation that she's encouraging China to invade Taiwan and, setting up another Ukraine war situation where now the U.S. is going to be poised to give billions of dollars to Taiwan. Who knows? So this doesn't seem like a very good idea to me, but to get a better opinion, joining me now is my good friend Raheem Kassam, who, of course, is the editor-in-chief of the National Pulse. So, Raheem, thanks for joining me today. And what's going on here?
I think a lot of people are wondering that, especially against the backdrop of everything that's going on in the United States at the moment. For the speaker to take a foreign trip at a time like this, when so many people have, so many domestic problems, at a time of, domestic political tumult, and also I think at a time when internationally America is already kind of at least more extended than it wants to be, or that it foresaw that it would be, militarily and geostrategically, with what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, and also what seems to be bubbling up between Serbia and Kosovo now as well. That sort of, I'll use a generic term. It's not particularly precise about what Pelosi's doing here, but let's say saber rattling in the South China Sea doesn't seem to be the most wise thing to do at this point in time. But the way these things work is that we have an expression: you wait hours and hours for a bus, and then three come along at once. Well, you've managed, thanks in great part, I think, to your last president, to avoid new wars and getting into new long-term entanglements, and even getting out of some old ones. Even though it was Biden who ended up handling the bungled withdrawal from Afghanistan. But now you have a series of geopolitical crises occurring around the world all at the same time. And really, this is a test of America's mettle. It's a test of America's mettle in terms of how much power it can actually project all across the world. And that is what America's enemies, such as the Chinese Communist Party, such as the Russian government, are seeking to find out. Now, a lot of people will watch this and say, "Oh, well, the Russians aren't our enemy." No, the Russians aren't your enemy. But unfortunately, your two political elites, the elites in DC and the elites in Moscow, have decided on your behalf that there is going to be this great long animus between them for almost no discernible reason. And you have now a Chinese Communist Party where you think actually there are plenty of reasons to feel like you have animus with the Chinese Communist Party. You can feel animus towards them because of the way they treat their own people. You can feel animus towards them because of the way they treat your people. They treat the Western world. They were allowed into the normal trading relation status with the Western world several decades ago to much fanfare, and you had Bush going up there and Clinton going up there celebrating the fact that more businesses were moving to China, more trade was being done with China, more dignitary visits were happening between the United States and other Western nations and China. And then over the course of time, what has happened is what the critics for the last several decades predicted would happen, is that actually China had no interest in being a subsidiary power to the United States. It actually wanted to challenge the United States, not just as a regional hegemon, but actually as a global one too. And so this is I think for a lot of people, it feels like the beginning of that taking place. I think we're at the end of the beginning, or coming towards the end of the beginning in this great saga here playing out for more global control. And against all of that backdrop, and very much more, by the way, Nancy Pelosi goes and flexes. That's effectively what this is an attempt to do, is to flex some U.S. muscle to say the United States, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, can go wherever she wants, whenever she wants, and the protests of Beijing will not factor into the considerations there. That's obviously overstating the case. Of course, there have been there's been a lot of consternation in Washington, D.C. I know there's been a lot of consternation in the White House around this trip. But it raises the question then, what are we trying to get done here? Well, the critics and the cynics, of which I am often one or both, will say, look, Nancy Pelosi and her stock portfolio and the semiconductors, and Taiwan is known for making 95% of the advanced chips that are used in the Western world, and especially in the United States of America. I mean, I said a few months ago, said if the situation continues where you don't repatriate advanced chip manufacture or chip manufacture in general to the US, we'll find ourselves at a position where people will be outside raiding the lampposts for microchips. And against a lot of that backdrop too, we see Taiwan as strategically important, as in the American national interest. The problem is it's not America. And the problem is that the solution to the American national interest is not trying to project power thousands of miles away to a small place that is already the subject of great consternation within the region. And I hope the Taiwanese people don't see this as a kind of disabusement of their plight. But what it is not an America first mindset to say that the way to deal with these problems, especially supply chain problems, advanced chip manufacture, so on and so forth, are to start defending these foreign outposts militarily. So I think there's several things going on here. Number one, it's feeling out the situation over there. It's the United States, diplomatic corps and political establishment feeling out the situation over there. I saw somebody recently say that this is just like Britain defending the Falklands. Yeah, except China isn't Argentina in the 1980s. There's a lot more at stake here. The other part of it is, I think that there will be, as there always is with any of these political visits, some selfish motives on Nancy Pelosi's behalf. We know about her investments in Nvidia and so on and so forth, but I don't think that's a driving factor. What I think this is one of the gasps of what the Washington political establishment itself now accepts to be a dying oligarchy, by which I mean the Washington D.C. elite, not the Chinese. You have to take the relationship as a whole over the last decade plus, what we call elite merger, not elite capture, elite merger, and I'll explain that in a second. That so many people, I'm coming to you from Capitol Hill right now, so many people here in this neighborhood and downtown in Washington, D.C., and across in Foggy Bottom, they believe that their future, their financial futures, their power based futures, and even the US national future is predicated on a rising China. And a rising China, unfortunately, appears to be predicated on walking hand in hand with the Chinese Communist Party. It also starts to explain a lot of the things that we start to see in elections at the moment. The big elephant in the room at the moment in the United States is COVID-19 still. It's not just the handling of COVID-19 and what Deborah Birx writes in her book and so on and so forth. It's where did it come from? How did it spread? What data was not allowed out? Who pulled the strings of the World Health Organization? Who is Anthony Fauci funding in Wuhan? Why did we trust the Chinese Communist Party's lockdown procedures? How did they get that information over to us? What lobby groups are being retained in Washington, D.C.? What law firms are being retained here to tamp down on all of these questions that you'd think, given how long they told us that this was a new 9/11, you'd think we might have a new 9/11 commission. But every time you raise any of these extremely pertinent questions in the minds of the American public, why are we so reliant, for instance, for so many of our electronics imports and toys and chips from a power that appears to have lied, hidden the origin of the virus, and is now saber rattling back, I suppose you could say, about the House Speaker's trip to Taiwan. So, Jenna, I mean, with that lecture out of the way, there's a lot going on here.
There is, and and I'm fascinated by this and all of your insights. And it seems like, and one of the big questions that a lot of people I've seen have pushed back on or are wondering, saying, okay, well, if Nancy Pelosi is going and seems to be saber rattling on the side of being against China. Is that a signal that she's trying to go against Biden, who we all know is in the pocket of China? Is she trying to serve his interests in a roundabout way by just virtue signaling or maybe a false flag to pretend that she's poised against China? Or what's your view of the tension between the speaker and the White House over this trip?
Yeah, look, I think there's a large amount of tension. There's a large amount of tension between Biden's DOJ and the January 6th committee. Each trying to one up one another, each trying to say, well, we're actually in control of the real parts of this, and that is the same with this as well. I mean, it's classic Democrats in power, where by whatever mechanism and measures they have ended up with control in Washington D.C., and now they can't even agree amongst themselves, with what to do with that control. The fact that, and I have pretty outlandish theories on this, by the way, and I hold my hands up to them, but sometimes the outlandish is the ways that you can best explain some of the absurd things that are going on, like rebound COVID, and then the president of the United States has to, go back into his, just like pre-election campaign quarantine, right? And that is an opportunity. As far as Nancy Pelosi is concerned, that is an opportunity. As far as a lot of the Democrats, which is most of them, most people should realize, it ain't just Democrats in Rasmussen polls that say we don't want Joe Biden serving another term. It's Democrats on Capitol Hill. It's almost every Democrat on Capitol Hill. And listen, they're only holding Joe Biden to his word about this, right? He entered that race calling himself a transitionary candidate. Well,
One
guess
term.
what, Biden? They are about to transition you the heck out of there. And all of the things that we have been screaming about for so long, the hard drive from hell, his very, very open and clear dementia, along with the fact that he doesn't actually have a governing philosophy. There's no Bidenism. Historians won't be able to go back and say, oh, well, what actually was, Biden politics in the White House? It wasn't anything. It was fighting a series of small fires, a series of medium-sized fires, and ignoring the large fires that are raging all across the country. That's if you were to sum up Bidenism, that's what it is. And Democrats know that they cannot afford to go into let alone these midterms, but they absolutely cannot afford to go into 2024 like that. So clapped out people, even like Nancy Pelosi, have to take the reins here and say, listen, we're not. And look, you could take this back as well to what we've just seen in there's an Al Qaeda terrorist leader who was killed. I mean, this is to say this is some major national security achievement is a manifest nonsense. The Al Qaeda leader is just a duty manager at this point. This isn't like taking out Osama bin Laden, which I think the world will happily give Barack Obama and the team around him and all the SEALs who did such an amazing job credit for. But this ain't that. This is a little distraction again. It's another little Biden world distraction to try and say, no, I am in charge and I do know what's going on. You don't even have to pretend. We've all kind of accepted it. And now Nancy Pelosi is acting on that acceptance that we all feel towards the impotency of the Biden regime. And I think one additional part of the puzzle there is the weakness of Republicans on this. When I was saying this to somebody this morning, I said the problem with the Republican Party platform at the moment is they say two things. Number one, we ain't them. That's number one, the number one stool, a leg in the stool. And number two is to say we question every single institution, and we are no longer going to go along with the status quo, and so on and so forth. And then when they get into power, they don't do anything about it. And there's no third leg of the stool either. So it's not exactly built to last.
hmm Right. And they can't just play defense and think that that's going to continue winning elections. And so, as we're poised to go into the midterms, what effect is this going to have on the Democrats' platform and how they are going to try to advance elections? Because, as you've just mentioned in the opening, so many Americans are so frustrated by everything going on at home. They're now frustrated that Nancy Pelosi is going to Taiwan instead of San Francisco to her own district where people are suffering. And so, how is this going to be spun in favor of Democrats? And what would you like to see as the Republicans actually better response than, hey, we're not just them?
Yeah, well, the difference is, Taiwan may well become a war zone. San Francisco's already a war zone. It has been a war zone for quite some time. So Nancy Pelosi's, flight over her constituents, waving down, I'm sure, as she passed over, is somewhat understandable from her perspective. No great photo opportunities over there. Um, I I'm always of the belief that you have to fight elections not on what you're against, but what you're for. And what you're against can form a foundation of the way you present your case to the public. You have to present the case against the other side, of course, but you also have to present the case for something and why also. And I think, by the way, that is where a lot of our pro-life arguments fall down as well. Is we kind of
Mhm.
say what we're against. We say what we're against a lot on that subject. We don't always say what we're for in contrast. And because we think it's an automatic thing, oh, well, you're against abortions, you must be for life. Yeah, but like for life is you got to be a little bit more detailed, and then why, where that comes from, why we believe it, not just spiritually, why we believe it, not just as human beings, why we believe it from a policy perspective, what data bears out from those things, that people are receptive, voters rather are receptive to that. Non-voters, they're always going to be the ones sort of screaming on Twitter but never actually going down and marking the ballots. But the voters are actually listening to arguments on a day-to-day basis. And I know that because I get out of this city as much as humanly possible. And I talk to as many people know me very well. They know I like to go to pubs, right? And there is no better place to understand the way that the world is thinking, the way this country is thinking, then maybe I should do a pub tour of America and make a documentary out of it or something like that. But
What is
these
a
are the
pub?
things that I
That'll
think.
be a
Um,
great title for you.
yeah, Tocqueville had democracy in America. I could sort of do pubocracy in America. Um, but that is the critical thing I think that a lot of Republicans fail to understand as well. And I'll add this: a lot of people, when you talk to them about COVID-19, they're in two minds about it. Most reasonable, rational people didn't like hardline long-term lockdowns. They don't think that mandatory vaccinations on repeat forever with no accountability to pharmaceutical companies and especially targeting children are a good idea. They don't think you should have to show your papers to go into a restaurant. They don't think you should be having to wear microplastics coated masks on aeroplanes and so on and so forth. Most reasonable people are open to all of the discussions in those areas. The problem that they have is that they wanted a stronger response sooner. They wanted a response. They wanted to know what was going on in December, not March. In even in January to have a fuller idea of what was going on, what this virus was, how we could hold the Chinese Communist Party to account. So they don't know whether to trust Republicans on that subject, because it was Republicans who had, the White House at least at that period of time, and voters still feel, whether you agree with it or not, on the whole, that there wasn't enough proactive information, there wasn't enough proactive steps being taken at that point. And by the time that measures were taken, by the time the World Health Organization deemed it pandemic, by the time Debbie Birx had her talons into the committee, the only response was, well, I guess we better shut down the economy for 15 days. And then after 10 days, it was, well, we better shut down the economy for 30 days. And of course, I would argue that the economy has never really fully reopened again. So, if Republicans want better results than the primary results that we're seeing at the moment, those are the tough questions that they're going to have to grapple with. And I think Trump needs to do this as well, by the way. I think that Trump should absolutely give full throated arguments and answers as to because everybody's had their say on this now, right? We're hearing Jared
Mhm.
Kushner's book now. We've got Debbie Birx's book. We hear from Fauci, 18 times a day on basically every different podcast that exists. But people want to hear from Trump. Like, what was happening at the beginning? Why did you choose to listen to certain people? And how do we make sure that those sorts of things don't happen again? So, to answer the question in a very roundabout way, it's all of this, all of that stuff surrounding China and COVID is absolutely massive, absolutely massive. And the Democrat Party knows this best. It is how to avoid having to deal with those issues. It is to, oh, we'll go to Taiwan instead. Yeah, but what about COVID? No, we'll go to Taiwan instead. And that is a very good way to distract people with some shiny object over here for just a little while, but it doesn't get to the heart of the disdain that most people feel for the institutions that guide their lives now. And I think if Republicans really, really wanted to put the boot into the Democrats here, they would answer those questions and not those questions.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it seems like Republicans aren't as direct on the issues that America wants to hear about. They only want their own preferred distractions as well, and they want to. I mean, even the questions surrounding Hunter's laptop, for example. I mean, those are very important issues, and absolutely there are questions around that. But that doesn't actually impact everybody's day to day lives like the COVID pandemic did, or even like the pro life arguments. And even as you were articulating that, it occurred to me that's exactly what the Republicans don't do well, is that we allow the framing of the issue to be anti-abortion versus pro-life, and that's what the Democrats call us, and they call themselves, pro-choice. It sounds a lot better, and so we are almost always playing catch up and defense rather than offense. And so, are there a couple of candidates around the country that you see are doing this as Republicans in a smarter way than perhaps some of the Republicans in the swamp currently?
Um, Not not really. There are some who sort of get to, and maybe you can correct me on this. There are some who sort of get to it. I mean, I know I sent a tweet the other day and I said, why have I not heard a big tub thumping campaign from a political candidate who is promising immediately to use all and any political capital they have once elected to revoke the protections that are enjoyed by the pharmaceutical industry for not just this vaccine, by the way, but look at the history of these companies. Look how many fines they've had to endure before. If they had had the same level of accountability with these vaccines as they had prior, which wasn't very much accountability, by the way, but there was still some, they would be bankrupt by now. They would be absolutely bankrupted by now as a result of that. And I thought Republicans believed in market philosophies, but the government protecting corporations from lawsuits to do with the administration of mandatory vaccines is not a market-based solution in the slightest, and it's not even a solution that we should even think about having in a Western
It's not a
nation at all. But
moral
nobody wants
solution
to
either.
talk about that and address that because it's such an uncomfortable thing, isn't it?
It is, and I think I actually think that one of the reasons as well is that Republicans are very, very hesitant to go into that topic because the vaccine and the partnership with big pharma was done under the Trump administration, and everyone is very worried about going against Trump or in any way opening the door for criticism there because he hasn't come out and actually talked about it as directly as I think a lot of the voters would prefer. And I think you're absolutely right that if he does end up running, and I think everybody he is pretty sure that he's going to, he will have to face some of those questions from people who aren't just totally red-blooded MAGA base. He's going to have to answer some of those questions, because what people saw during the vaccine and during all of his handling of COVID were some of these unanswered questions. And they're wondering, okay, why were there these protections, and what actually happened? Why did you choose Deborah Birx, for example? Why didn't you fire Fauci? Some of those things. But a lot of these candidates that want his endorsement, they want his political capital, don't want to ask these questions, because that may be used against him and then ultimately against them, which I think is the worst way for a candidate to run, is just in the shadow of the kingmaker. But the one person that I see navigating this really well and being willing to go after the issues and stand firm is Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania. And of course, full disclosure, I'm a senior advisor on his campaign, but the main reason that I am advocating for him is because I'm seeing him do this. And, he has gone out on the campaign trail, and he is 100% saying we have to roll back every single, COVID measure that was not in anyone's best interest. We have to open up the economy again in a truly capitalist way. We have to make sure that we are giving people the ability to walk in freedom, not under all of these government mandates. And he would be the first one to say that absolutely we should be able to hold big pharma accountable. And so, as one governor, that's very different than somebody in Congress and all of those different postures. But I think if more people were willing to not be concerned just about what Donald Trump thinks, we would have a lot more Republicans that are willing to ask these important questions.
Yeah, look, I mean, I also just don't think that Trump needs to necessarily feel attacked or bad about these things. The answer to the question, why did you put Debbie Birx in that position? And I've been going through Debbie Birx's book, and there's a lot of revelations in there, actually. But the answer to the question to that is simple. Who else did you have in mind? I had Matt Pottinger come to me and tell me Debbie Birx. I had Matt Mowers come to me and tell me Debbie Birx. I had the whole of the White House apparatus around me come to me, including the people that you liked back then. Nobody had any complaints about Mike Pence back then, saying to me,
Right.
"This is the woman." So what else was I supposed to do? Right? It would have been
And that is the
ludicrous of him
answer.
to have necessarily made another decision in that regard. But the more important question is that who is the head of the task force, and why, when Debbie Birx, who now admits that she was changing numbers, and she used the word subterfuge in her, everything that she did back then, why was the head of the task force and his staff, who, by the way, are now on CNN and MSNBC. Let's be very clear about that. Mark Schott on CNN, Olivia Troy on MSNBC. Why was Pence's staff allowing that to happen? That is the more interesting question. And honestly, given the way that Pence is going, and I expect him to try and challenge Donald Trump for the nomination, as Trump, I would welcome this conversation now, because then he gets to open this
Mhm.
up and say, okay, Mr. Head of the Task Force, while we're on the subject, let's talk about this. I was the president of the United States. I can't just be the head of the task force. That's why I deputized you to do that role. You did it, or you said you were going to do it full-throatedly. Let's take a look at your achievements in that role. And we can have that out. And most people, most good-minded, open-hearted, good faith people who go to the polls will watch that conversation honestly, earnestly, and take away from it, the things that are actually said by each side, rather than just the noise.
Yeah, and I wish that we could have that open of political conversation. It seems like none of those conversations are being had other than on podcasts like this one, or you do such a great job bringing the issues to National Pulse, and all of these other sort of alternative outlets, rather than, especially mainstream media doesn't cover anything except propaganda for their particular and preferred candidates, but so not only mainstream media, but even within the political apparatus, it seems like the politicians just gravitate toward what they're comfortable with rather than what the voters actually want to know about. And this comes back full circle to Pelosi going to Taiwan as a total distraction, and isn't willing to talk about the issues that Americans really want to see. So moving forward, in just the last few minutes that I have with you, Raymond, and this conversation has been so fascinating. What do you see as the world response, and how can conservatives like us who want to have answers to these important questions? How can we better drive the conversation and maybe force those issues to be discussed instead of just sitting back and allowing the narrative to prevail based on what the Washington elites want?
Yeah, look, sometimes I think about renaming the national pulse the international pulse because I think the left does a pretty good job and the political establishment does a pretty good job of kind of owning, the international beat. When you want to find out what's going on around the world, unfortunately, predominantly, you only have left wing or establishment outlets, the Atlantic and CNN and the BBC and all that kind of stuff. We don't really have that on the political right where we focus almost entirely on hey, here are the pitfalls that you might come across if you get these globalists trying to take you into these specific areas in the world. Hey, here are the trade deals that are emerging that actually impact your day-to-day lives. Hey, here is what the supply chain looks like right now, and those sorts of things, right? And I think we do a particularly bad job on the right of actually dealing with what's going on around the rest of the world. Taiwan especially. You know, MSNBC, since I dunked on them now, I'll boost them up a little bit here. They aired a war game a couple of months ago. It was an hour-long special on there, and I got to catch up with it very recently. And it was actually a pretty well-run war game of this scenario with Taiwan that plays out. And in every single iteration of this, and on every single round, China wins. Why? It's just normal geostrategic, geopolitical realities here. The proximity, the deployability, and public support for this for what would be a campaign thousands and thousands of miles away for the United States of America. What I want to leave people with here, not on that bad and sad and worrisome note, especially for if you're Taiwan, but is this: you are a stronger country when you are less reliant on other places in the world. You have to bring back that chip manufacture. You have to bring back that advanced chip manufacture. And it ain't just about that, right? Again, that is what we're against. We're against putting those jobs abroad and those and that reliance abroad. But let's be eloquent also about what we're for. Is that America can't just go, we want those things back. Once it comes back, you then have to build on it and say, we're also going to be the innovators in this space for the next 1,000 years. Get used to it. That's the mentality that voters want.
Yeah, and that perfectly describes Trumpism or America first, not just being anti jobs going overseas, but saying we are pro America, we are America first, and let's describe what this actually looks like in every area of policy. And that's why people do love and respect President Trump, and they want his policies to be returned to the United States, and they are looking forward to him running. And they don't want somebody like a Mike Pence who clearly doesn't have those same policies and interests in mind. So, Raheem Kassam, really appreciate all of your insights and analysis. Follow him at the National Pulse and also on all social media. And anything else that you want to promote or where people can find you.
Yeah, if people, we are 100% reader and visitor and user funded. We run a subsite called fundrealnews.com where people can go and decide if they want to be in a private chat groups with us or to purchase one of our cool hats, something like that. We don't ever want to get into the situation where we have to rely on foundation grants and corporate sponsorships. And Jenna, from some of our enemies on the political right, where that ends you up, where the play to play and grift mentality ends you up. So we have democratized how our website runs. And if people want to support us, they can go to fundrealnews.com.
Excellent. And, neither of us are in Dallas right now, so that should tell you something about the grifters. So,
That's right.
yeah,
That's
well,
right.
keep speaking truth and great to see you, my friend. Thanks so much.
You too. Cheers.
Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And when and we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. MyPillow is having their biggest sheet sale of the year. You all have helped build MyPillow into the amazing company that it is today. Now, Mike Lindell, the inventor and CEO, wants to give back exclusively to you, his listeners. The Percale bed sheet set is available in a variety of colors and sizes, and they are all on sale. So, for example, the queen size is regularly priced at $89.98, but is now only $39.98 with our listener promo code Jenna, Jenna. So order now, because when they're gone, they're gone. The Percale bed sheets are breathable and have a cool and crisp feel. These come with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee, so don't miss out on this incredible offer. There's a limited supply, so be sure to order now. You can call 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna, or go to mypillow.com/Jenna. You can click on the radio listeners square and use the promo code Jenna. That's Jenna. Thank you so much to all of Mike Lindell's listeners and listeners of this podcast for making sure to support MyPillow and using our exclusive listener promo code Jenna. That's Jenna.